I do need to warn everybody that I'm recording this event so that if you don't want to be seen, and I think plenty of people know that already, you should hide your face. So while our speaker is speaking, you're very welcome to put questions in the chat box if you want to, just so that you remember. Otherwise, wait till the end, and I'm sure Emily will be happy to answer your questions. The purpose of Speak Up for Our Planet is to get everybody thinking, talking and learning about our environment and how we can protect it. So I am particularly excited to welcome Emily Stevenson. I first heard of her when she was a teenager and Walker's Crisps were being criticized by her because of the fact that they didn't recycle their crisp packets. She's not a teenager anymore, but she's still not very old. But she's an award-winning conservationist and a marine plastics expert. So please join me in welcoming Emily, who's going to talk to us about plastic pollution solutions.
Thank you so much, everybody, for such a warm welcome. And Jane, thank you, especially to you, for putting so much into organising not just this presentation, but the whole series. I think it's so important that we dedicate time to just talk about the planet, because once we have that connection to nature, we start thinking about how we're going to protect it. So what we're going to start off with in traditional lockdown Zoom way is a bit of a quiz, because, you know, who doesn't love a quiz? So I'm going to share my screen, and what should pop up is 12, I think 12 pictures, and they're all of different things that we find on the beach, in the environment, and it's your job to determine whether these items or things are natural or not. So whether they are natural or man-made. Very, very simple. Hopefully you can all see it as well. Hopefully I've done that right. But all you have to do is write down number 1 and whether you think whatever that is in the photograph is natural or not.
So use the chat box. And I mean, you could just list natural and then a list of numbers. Do it however you like.
But I might be trying to trick you on some of them. So I'll give this a few minutes just so I give you a chance at getting some of these right. What would be interesting actually is if I do this now and then do my presentation and then show it again and see if you might change your answers.
That's a really good idea.
Oh, I'm full of them. Thanks, Jane. Okay, so we'll keep this up for 2 minutes.
I've got one reply. I think we need to give people a little bit longer to have a look at it.
We'll go until Jane, when do you think we should go until?
Let's just I'll watch the chat. When we've got quite a few answers up, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I want to watch the chat as well, actually. I would like to see how everybody's getting on. I'm just seeing if I would be able to tell you the answers without looking at the answer sheet.
Some of them are really hard. Some of them aren't.
Yeah, I see which ones you may be talking about.
because everybody's muted, of course, we can't hear all the discussions that are going on behind the scenes.
It's probably good because somebody might be saying, oh, just Google it. No cheating.
Okay, everybody, come on, we've only got another minute. Yeah.
Shall I give a little inkling of a clue of how many are natural and how many aren't? Or should we just totally move on and come back to it?
Yeah, let's come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to stop.
We'll keep that. The chat will still be there. People can go on adding to it if they want to. Okay,
so I'll stop sharing. Everybody in agreement? Time's up. Right, there we are. So that was a bit of fun to get us started, and probably by that and the title of the talk, you may be aware by now that we're going to be talking about plastic pollution. So my name is Emily Stevenson. I'm the co-founder of Beach Guardian, which is a community interest company based in Cornwall. And what I'd like to do this evening is briefly go over some of the issues with plastic that we're facing, what I do to tackle it, and then also what you can all do to tackle it too, because I think it's all well and good hearing about the dire state our planet is in, but what can we actually proactively do to tackle that? So what I'd like to begin with, as I say, is talk about some of the problems of plastic that we face, but I am very aware that this is somewhat drilled into us now with, you know, every single day in the news, in the press, somebody is talking about plastic pollution, thank goodness. But I don't want people to start getting complacent with the issue because we hear about it so much. So what I like to try and do is go over some of the issues with plastic that I've seen that maybe not many people are aware of, or perhaps I fear that we have this issue in the UK where people will associate the problems with plastic far away in the tropics, where there's great whales and beautiful dolphins entangling in plastic fishing nets, but it's not happening on our doorstep. But of course it is. So what I'm going to talk about is problems that are very specific to what we find in the UK, but they're also found elsewhere in the world. But just to really reinforce that it is happening here and it is happening now. So I am currently on gallery view. I would suggest maybe making sure, I know all about me, making sure I'm full screen for this bit, because I'm going to be showing you it's a bit of a show and tell. So you'll see the most if I'm full screen. I just love the spotlight, essentially. So the first problem that I'd like to talk to you about is actually one of the smallest in size, but not the smallest in consequence. And these are the microplastics. So microplastics, by definition, are any plastics less than 5 millimeters in size. So I have a couple examples here to show you. It's quite tricky to see because we are virtually meeting, but also they are just so small in size. Just to give you an idea of something that you can imagine is similar to these microplastics that I'm showing you, the black ones here look a bit like peppercorns, and the white ones here look a bit like white lentils. So let's go through microplastics. When we talk about microplastics, there are two different categories that they can fall into. There's primary microplastics and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastics are manufactured to be small in size, so they are made to be 5 millimeters or less. So these are things like microbeads that are put into cosmetics, which is fortunately now banned here in the UK. It was banned in 2017, but before that, research found that per shower, if you're using an exfoliant or a cosmetic that has microbeads in, you could be sending 100,000 microplastics down the drain per shower. So thank goodness it got banned. Another form of primary microplastics that we can talk about are these. So these are the lentil sized ones that I was telling you about. These are what we call nurdles. Now, this is not going to be any more useful in showing you them, but just to give you another idea of size, if I turn that, no, that makes it worse. You can almost kind of see that. These are really, really small plastic pellets. Now, nurdles are so important when we talk about plastics because these are the building blocks of plastic products. This is how your plastic bottle, your ice cream tub, everything else in your life that is plastic, this is how it will have started off mostly. So essentially, imagine a plastic bottle. You need 600 of these to make one plastic bottle. So if you imagine how many millions, billions of plastic bottles we get through every single year, it begins to give you an idea of the scale of the amount of these that we are using. Now, with the scale of these that we're using comes consequences on the environment. It's estimated that 53 billion of these plastic pellets could be spilling into the environment every single year in the UK alone. 53 billion of these. Now, the problem with nurdles when they're in the environment is that they are very similar in size to the natural food source of many of the animals that are at the base of our food chain. So these are getting into the food chain. They also look very similar to fish eggs, which is kind of the delicacy of the ocean for both marine creatures and us. I have never eaten caviar, but that gives you an idea of this kind of thing that it looks like. So let's pop those down and move on to the next one. Try not to spill them everywhere because I'm obviously talking about spillage into the environment. But actually the problem with the nurdles when they get spilt, aside from obviously the environmental cost, there is no real financial incentive for the companies, the manufacturers that spill these to clean them up. To manufacture about 250 of these, which is about the same amount in this jar, will only cost them 1 penny. So if you're spilling this amount every day, there's no incentive to clean that up. So staying with our primary microplastics, here's another type that you saw earlier, the peppercorns. These are called biobeads, and again, they're primary microplastics, so they're made to be small in size. Now, these biobeads are actually used to filter sewage. Not many sewage treatment plants actually use this method to deal with our waste, but out of the 265 wastewater treatment plants in the southwest, 9 of them use biobeads to filter their sewage. It's actually quite a cheap and efficient way of dealing with sewage. Unfortunately, though, there are regular spills of these into the environment because whenever there is a storm drain that's overflowing or people flush unflushables down the loo and it causes blockages, these can spill out into the environment. And in 2010, on the Truro River, 5 billion of these spilt into the environment, and we find them on every single beach clean we do. And obviously they've come from our sewage, so you can begin to imagine the toxins and the potentially pathogenic bacteria that could be on those. So that's primary microplastics, and we see the impacts of this all the time on our coastline. They are absolutely prolific, and the quantities that these microplastics are in the environment are really staggering. It's estimated that 51 trillion microplastics have already accumulated in the ocean. And if you were to kind of pool all of those microplastics together, it would form the equivalent mass twice the size as Greenland. So a significant mass of plastic that's in the ocean. And that's just talking about the microplastics. Moving on to secondary microplastics, these are bigger items that have broken down to be small in size. So a plastic bottle goes into the ocean, and due to sunlight and wave action, it will break up into tiny pieces. So we have our primary and we have our secondary. Now, another issue that I'd like to talk to you about that, again, we see all the time on our beach cleans are these. Now, this is a bit of a fun one. I'll try and make this as tricky for you as I possibly can in my box of props. So, let's see. So these look, I'd say, identical to rocks, maybe, if you were down on the beach. Let me just move my light so I can try and show you a bit better. So if you were walking along a beach and you saw those, you would probably just leave them exactly where you found them because they look like rocks. Well, they aren't rocks. And this is why I do the picture quiz, because it really reinforces how tricky it is for us to tell the difference between what's natural and what's not. So how do we expect wildlife to do that? It's an unimaginable task. These aren't rocks, though they may look like geological formations. These are actually plastic rocks, and they are formed by the melting of plastic. They go by two different names, pyroplastics and plastiglomerates. And both of those terms are now accepted as geological terms. So plastic rocks are now actually part of geology. So when perhaps archaeologists in the future will look back on this time, our time in history, geological history, is going to be marked by plastic rocks, which I think is absolutely devastating. Now, the problem with these is because they are formed by molten plastic, they have all kinds of harmful additives in, heavy metals, lead, bromine, and when plastic items or any other debris gets into the ocean, they get colonized by bacteria, but also invertebrates. And we commonly find one specific species of, it's called a tube worm, and it has this kind of calcium carbonate shell that it attaches to various items in the sea. And researchers found that if one of these tube worms was to colonize a plastiglomerate or a pyroplastic, the actual heavy metals will diffuse into their calcium carbonate shell, which is carcinogenic. It causes all kinds of internal problems. And again, that's at the base of the food chain. So big problems. Don't worry, it's not all going to be doom and gloom this evening. And then another final issue that I'd like to talk to you about of some of the forms of plastic we might not be aware about are the literal invisible forms of plastic. Some of the items that people just have no idea that they are made out of plastic. For example, this coffee cup. You go into Costa, you go into any other coffee shop and you get a takeaway coffee. Typically, you'll get it in one of these. Now, many people will just assume that this is just cardboard because it does have a cardboard casing. So therefore, many people would assume that if you dropped it into the environment, it would break down naturally into natural components. Well, unfortunately, this is not the case, because on our beach cleans, what we find are these. Now, I call these the skeletons of coffee cups, because this is actually the plastic film that lines the cardboard coffee cups. So the cardboard will decompose, as you would rightly assume, but it leaves behind this. So it's this hidden form of plastic, and because this plastic is in this, neither of them can be recycled in a cardboard recycling stream or a plastic recycling stream. So obviously there's areas where we need to change the way that we are manufacturing products to make them more recyclable. And a final thing, I think we're all aware what this is now, the disposable face covering or the disposable face mask. Now, I had never found one of these on my beach cleans ever before 2020. Now we find them on every single beach clean that we do in vast quantities. In fact, here's one I made earlier. This is a box of all of the face coverings we have found in just the last 3 months, in here we have 266 face masks in just 3 months. So it gives you an idea of the scale of the issue. Now, these face coverings are made out of plastic. They're made out of polypropylene, which is a very dense thermoplastic. It can't be recycled, and it's also non-biodegradable too. So there's just a few of the issues that we're facing with plastic. But as I say, it's not all doom and gloom. And there are lots of things that we can do to tackle it, because yes, plastic is everywhere. It's in all of our lives. It's in places we never even assumed were plastic. But actually, that's the very reason why we can tackle this, is because it's in all of our lives. It's everywhere we look. I can hear the crickets. Thank you. You told me the crickets were going to be loud. Plastic is in all of our lives. There are so many different angles and so many different areas that we can tackle it. So now I'm going to try the complicated part of doing a very fancy virtual background to move on to explaining what I do to tackle plastics. So what do we actually do at Beach Guardian? Well, at Beach Guardian, we operate under 5 different categories. We work with empowering communities in education, working with businesses to help them reduce their reliance on plastics, researching the issue with plastics and finding alternatives, and also working collaboratively, because after all, our voices are only going to be louder together. But how did Beach Guardian actually start before I go into explaining more about what we do? Jane, can I just make sure, can you actually see stuff around me at this point? Good, okay, it's working, fantastic. So how did Beach Guardian start? This is how it all started, and it's a very cliche story of, you know, I've always loved the ocean, but unfortunately that is exactly how it started, and I totally fit that cliche. So behind me here, this is a website that I started when I was 12 years old, and I've just moved down to Cornwall. I was very fortunate in being able to spend most of my childhood by the sea. And I was at school, I was in year 7, and our art teacher said to me that, well, she said to the class, everybody go down to the beach this weekend and find some natural items, bring them in, and we will turn it into an art piece. So everybody went to the beach, found shells, seaweed, sand, that kind of thing. But 11 years ago, 12 years ago now, that was, I went down to the beach and I was finding plastic. So I took that in and I decided to use that for my art project. And I was finding so much plastic, and I really enjoyed creating something out of, you know, something really beautiful out of something so destructive, that I thought, well, maybe other people would want to do this too. So that was the idea behind the website, was that I was selling plastics that I was finding on the beach so other people could use them for art projects. And I was raising money for the Marine Conservation Society. And it was then that I decided that I wanted to be a marine biologist. I was going to do everything I possibly could to protect everything that I cared about. So I decided to go to Plymouth University. I studied my marine biology degree. I'm now doing my master's degree in conservation science and policy. And it was then that the Beach Guardian concept and idea and ethos and passion started working and turning cogs in my brain. So then that takes us to 2017, where we first started Beach Guardian properly in our community. And it was all thanks to Blue Planet 2, when suddenly overnight the world woke up to plastic, and David Attenborough did our work for us, because almost instantly people were aware of this issue and they wanted to do something about it. And we saw that in our community, that people wanted to protect the environment, but they just maybe didn't know how to. So we decided that we would give people opportunities to do beach cleans, and we would facilitate volunteering events. So we were doing a lot of beach cleans, and the Daily Telegraph saw that we were doing some beach cleans, and they wanted to send a reporter down to join us. So the reporter came down, And I think they're actually quite disappointed to see that the beaches weren't meter deep in plastic, like they wanted that really shocking picture. They're actually quite clean. Of course, the community cleans them every single day, and dog walkers fill a poo bag with plastic when they're walking their dogs in the morning. But they wanted an impressive photograph to go in the newspaper. So I said, okay, wait here, I'll go find you something. And I did. I went off into the sand dunes at Constantine Bay, a lovely beach in North Cornwall, and I found this crisp packet. Now, this crisp packet put me on the front page of the Daily Telegraph because this crisp packet is the same age that I am. It's been on the planet for 23 years now, and it looks exactly the same as the day that it was made. And this perfectly sums up the very problem with plastic, is that every single piece of plastic that was ever made is still on the planet in one way or another, in one form or another. So I held up the crisp packet and I posed, and he took the photograph, and it was on the front page of the Daily Telegraph the very day that Theresa May and the government announced their 25-year action plan against plastics. Now, for us at Beach Guardian, 25 years is far too long. We need to be making changes now. So that was what really kick-started all of our operations into full speed, because we were doing the beach cleans and we were working with volunteers, but we weren't working at full potential, and it was that really empowered us to get going with it. So a big part of what we do is engaging with the community and empowering communities to take part of their local environment. And to do that, we do a lot of beach cleans. But what we think makes us a little bit different, everybody does beach cleans now, or litter picks, wherever you are. But what makes us a bit different is that we're doing all of these events. We were cleaning up so much rubbish from the environment. What are we actually going to do with it? Because it didn't seem right to take this debris off the beach and just put it in the bin and think that it's going to go away, because as we've learned, there is no true away. How do we know where that plastic is going to? The only way we're going to know is if we keep it and dispose of it ourselves as sustainably as we possibly can. So our community has always been incredibly supportive of us, and they donated 2 fantastic facilities for us to use and store all of our materials in. So we have this epic, huge 80-foot polytunnel up at our local garden centre that was donated, so we can run workshops there, invite schools, businesses for corporate social responsibility, other community groups, the Rotary, the Brownies, all kinds of people can come to our polytunnel and learn about plastics and engage with nature. And also we have this fantastic building that you see on the bottom half of the picture there. This is the Beach Guardian Shack, very elaborate and elegant name. It looks from the outside, it looks a bit like a shed, but it's beautiful. It's like a TARDIS. And again, it's just a perfect opportunity for us to provide volunteering events. But just to give you an idea of the amount of plastic we've collected, these photographs are actually a bit outdated now. This was last year. And each bag that you see is 1 beach clean. Now, I always find these photographs harrowing to look at, because you have to remember, all we do at Beach Guardian is clean a 10-mile stretch of the North Cornwall coastline. And we've only been doing the beach cleans since 2017. So in 3 years, on a 10-mile stretch of the coastline, this is how much we've collected. And it's thought that the plastic on beaches is a mere 1% of how much plastic is really out there in the marine environment. So this is a staggering amount, but it's just the tip of the iceberg when thinking about how that scales up to the rest of Cornwall, the rest of the UK, the rest of the world. It's really shocking. But having this pile of plastic brings us unique opportunities to provide more resources to other groups in the community. And this brings me to one of our favourite collaborations that we currently have running, and it's with the WI. This is a fantastic story of how having the pile of plastic has become beneficial to the community. So our local WI ladies, they take our huge knotted clumps of nets and rope that we find on our beach cleans. We give them to them, and they host knot and natter coffee mornings. And they spend hours drinking coffee and tea, having a chat. But whilst they're doing that, they untangle all of our ropes for us and weave them into perfect, beautiful coils for us to use in various other projects. They absolutely love it. It's absolutely not slave labor at all. It's very therapeutic. I imagine it's like the opposite of knitting. They say that they're only going to do an hour and a half of a coffee morning. It always turns into 8 hours. They just love it. But to give you an idea of some of the projects that we've used, the ropes that they've untangled for us, we have here. In fact, I'm going to stop my virtual background because it will not like me showing you this. This is a willow fish that was done. We got these made for us at a sustainable willow craft centre. And this rope here was all tangled in a hideous bundle. The WI untangled it for us so we could take this fish and those coils into local schools to turn them into something beautiful like this that will last a lifetime and serves an awareness purpose as well as something nice to hang up in your house. Another idea of some of the creative stuff our volunteers make. These two little snails are made out of ghost fishing gear that the WI ladies untangled. So that's how we can engage in the community, by using everybody, all groups, all age, and really bring it together into a beautiful and lovely story. So we work in the community and we do education, but we heard this analogy last year where if you have a leaky sink in your bathroom, you wouldn't spend year after year mopping up the floor. You'd fix the tap. We thought we will spend year after year after year mopping up the plastic, doing the beach cleans. It's going to be endless unless we turn off the plastic tap. And it was then that we realized that we had to start working with some big organizations to stop plastic pollution at the source. So one of the first organizations that we started working with was Nissan. So Nissan approached us and said, okay, Beach Guardians, we've seen you've got some big problems with plastic on your beaches. We would like to help. We have one of our trucks that we have modified to become the beach cleaning truck. And we want to volunteer with you to help you with some of your issues. And with Nissan, we achieved some fantastic stuff in our community, removing 1/2 ton of ghost fishing nets from the environment. And since working with Nissan, they now give their global staff 2 paid days a year to volunteer in the community. And this could be beach cleaning, litter picking, or anything else that helps the community. We also produced a short film with them, which explores some of the issues that we face with plastics. If you'd be interested to see the film, I can send you the link in the chat once we've gone through the answers to the quiz. So that's Nissan. Another organisation that we're more recently working with is PepsiCo. Now, PepsiCo, if you're not aware of who they are, you might recognise some of the brands that they own. So PepsiCo is the second largest food and drink manufacturer in the world. They're also the second most plastic polluting organisations in the world. So a big player to be involved with. Now, you might see on this list of organisations here that they own Walkers. So you may be making the ties now between me, the Walkers, and the Walkers crisp packet you saw on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Because as I've already said, on our beach cleans, we find a lot of crisp packets that are the same age as me, if not older. The oldest crisp packet that we have found is from 1966. That's the year that my mum was born, over double my age. And I can tell you now, this crisp packet looks exactly the same as the day that it was made. And I wanted to send a message to Walkers and to PepsiCo that this single-use, non-recyclable packaging was unacceptable and they needed to make changes. but they're the second largest food and drink manufacturer in the world. How do I get their attention? Not least, how do I start that conversation? I knew I had to do something big. So I decided for my graduation from my marine biology degree, I would wear this dress that I made out of crisp packets. And it did exactly what I needed it to do. I got Walker's attention. So they said to me, okay, Emily, fine. By the year 2025, we will make 100% of our packaging recyclable, compostable, or biodegradable. To which I replied, that's great. By then, you'll have produced 28 billion more packets of crisps. You have to do something in the meantime to stop those packets ending up on our beaches down here in Cornwall. So I had some fantastic opportunities to go live on BBC, on Sky News, and the reporters said to me, well, what do you think needs to be done? So I thought, this is my opportunity. Yes, I can talk about the problem, but also the solutions too. So I said there's already an organisation called TerraCycle who can recycle crisp packets. All Walkers needed to do was team up with TerraCycle to offer a collection scheme where people collect crisp packets and then send them off to be recycled. I threw them a lifeline and I suggested what I thought that they should do. Well, lo and behold, a week later, I saw this in the news. Walker's crisp packets recycling scheme announced. And then 2 months later, I saw this. Walker's launches recycling scheme after storm over crisp packets. They did exactly what I asked of them. And now anywhere in the UK, you can collect and recycle crisp packets. It is the first scheme of its kind. And what I love about this scheme is that it takes the pressure off the consumer. For once, the manufacturer and the big organization took the power that they have to instigate change and to take the responsibility off the consumer. And we're continuing working with Walkers and PepsiCo to see what other changes they can make. So that's the business side of things. We work in the community, we work in education. We also work highly collaboratively, talking to absolutely anybody that wants to talk about the planet, which is what brings me to all of you today. And also, as I said earlier, we work in research to really investigate the problems of plastic, but also the many solutions. So as I said, I wanted to briefly touch on what you could all do to help preserve and protect the planet against plastics. Now, here are my 3 top tips. This is the way I need to move, yes. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of reduce, reuse, recycle before, the 3 R's. And whilst I think that this messaging is incredibly important, I also think that it's been drilled into at least me since I was a child at school or in the news. And I've kind of got a bit complacent with reduce, reuse, recycle. It doesn't really have that impact anymore. What I'd like to change it to is reuse, retrieve, and report, a different set of 3 R's. I think the reuse and retrieve kind of speak for themselves, but the report, I'll explain a little bit, because I don't expect all of you to start writing boring reports on plastic, because that's absolutely not what I'm asking of you. By report, I just mean talk about the planet. As we are doing now, the sole purpose of this series, talk about the planet. I think it is the single most important thing, the most powerful thing we can all do for the environment. And it's also the most human thing, the most accessible thing. Everybody can talk about the planet. And once you do that, you have the connection to the planet to want to preserve it. So just something really lovely that I'd like to leave you with is I feel that we have this really big issue with eco-anxiety, and this is a state of stress caused by concern for the Earth's environment. Now, I see this particularly prolifically in the schools that we go into. These young people really feel the weight on their shoulders of the future of the planet. But actually, what I'd like to reinforce to everybody is that there is definitely hope everywhere, and we can absolutely solve this. And I was reminded of this on a beach clean I did recently when I found this. Which way do I need to move? This way. So this is a plastic paint pot, And I found this on one of my beach cleans. This plastic paint pot has lots of different organisms living on it, but it's quite hard to see that nature is actually there. When you hold it this way, all you can see is the plastic. All you can see is man's present in the environment. You can only see man-made materials. It's hard to see that nature is there and it is trying to come back. But then I realized all I have to do is turn this paint pot ever so slightly, and I begin to see promise of a balance, human activity and nature coexisting sustainably together, that nature is there and it is trying to thrive. And then I realized all I need to do is turn the paint pot a full 180 degrees, and I can't even see the plastic anymore. All I can see is nature, and all I can see is life and hope. And this is exactly what we need to remember, is that sometimes you may have to look a little bit harder, you may have to try a little bit harder or work a little bit harder, but the hope is always there. Even if sometimes you think you can't see it, it is always there, especially when we talk about the planet. There is hope everywhere and nature is trying to thrive, but sometimes you may just have to look a little bit harder. And just to leave you with one of my favorite quotes that many of you may have heard before, and that is, the worst thing that we can do for the environment is think that somebody else will save it. We all have to remember that we are all that somebody that can do something. We will waste our lives thinking there's a problem, but somebody else will do something about it, or it's somebody else's job to do something about it. Chances are it's not going to get solved. Stand up and be that somebody that does something. Break that cycle of diffusing responsibility onto other people and be that somebody. So thank you again so much for having me to talk to you guys. I'm swapping over again. There we go. And if you have any questions at all, I'll be happy to answer them. We can either do questions now or I can run through the quiz. Up to you guys, but thank you again.
Why don't you run through the quiz, and I'll give everybody a chance to, first of all, say thank you, and second of all, add any points on the Q&A on the chat they want to, whether it's a question or whether it's an answer to the quiz. But first of all, many thanks, Emily. I thought that was absolutely fascinating and so passionate. You love so much what you're doing. It's so important. And I love the way you're involving your community. So yeah, so have another look, everyone, at these 12 things. If you've had a thought during the talk about which ones of these might be natural, feel free to add it into the chat box. We'll give you another minute, and then Emily will tell us.
I need to make sure I get it right now.
So we've got 4 and 9, I think everybody's managed to spot.
Yes.
2, 5, 6, 7 and 10. That's one person says. Jules says 1 and 2 are natural, 3, 4 and 5 not. Yeah, it's interesting. You've been confusing people. 2, 3, 7, 10. Yeah, it's difficult. It's clearly difficult.
Shall I run through what they are and whether they're natural?
Yeah, I think you should.
I'll put you out of your misery. So this first one here is a nappy, which is made out of plastic. This was following the recent container spill in North Devon, which sent thousands of nappies, plastic nappies, strewn across the coastline. So that is not natural. Then this second one here is a barrel jellyfish with me swimming alongside it, just to give you an idea of the size, although you can't really see it too well, but that is my body there. Barrel jellyfish are the biggest species of jellyfish we get in our British coastline here, but actually they're totally harmless to humans. They eat plankton, so their sting is adapted to only sting plankton, which is teeny tiny, so that is natural. The third one are sea potatoes. So these are also natural. And this is a sea urchin. And I had never actually found one of these before on one of our beach cleans until last year. And I found about 10 of them in one go. So I hit the gold mine of sea potatoes. So number 3, natural. Number 4, that there is a Golden Wonder crisp packet. That one, I believe, is 1969. Very good find. And the reason that I knew that it was from 1969 was that the price of it was 6D. So it was pre-decimalization. So that one there is not natural. 5, they are our nurdles. So remember at the beginning, I was talking about primary microplastics, the plastic pellets that make up plastic products. That's those lentil shaped plastics. So, and as you can see, they look very similar to fish eggs. So that's not natural. Number 6 is natural. This is a snake locks anemone that we find in our rock pools along our coast here. Very beautiful to look at, and it's hard to believe that that kind of vibrant color is present in the natural world. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So 6 is natural. 7 is natural. These are the tube feet of a spiny starfish, and you can see the other side of a spiny starfish down here. Number 12 is also natural. So both 7 and 12 are natural. 8 is a mermaid's purse. So these are actually the egg cases of sharks and rays that we regularly find on our beach cleans. So just like a chicken would lay an egg, some sharks and some rays that live off our coastline also lay eggs too. And this is the egg case that one of those babies would have hatched out of. So that's natural. It's actually made out of chitin, so the same component of our fingernails. Number 9, this is my Walker's crisp packet dress, so that is not natural. 10, those are the goose barnacles that were actually on the plastic paint pot that you saw, so they are also natural. 11, this is a very tricky one, and admittedly, I need to think about the answer of whether it's actually natural or not. I think both is the answer, which is really unfair of me. So this is palm oil. So it is, you can find it naturally, but this has been harvested and applied to man-made applications. And palm oil is a real problem that we face on our coastline as well. So palm oil is it's totally toxic to dogs, and it regularly washes up on our beaches and dogs will go and eat it. The reason for that is that palm oil is totally legal to dump into the ocean as long as you're 12 miles offshore. Now you might be thinking, where do I know palm oil from? Do you remember the Iceland Christmas advert, either last year or the year before, about the destruction of rainforests to produce palm farms? It's hard to say, palm farms, and the destruction of the orangutan natural habitat. That's what this is for. So if you look in your kitchen, I'm sure if you look on the ingredients list, a lot of it will say palm oil. That's what that is. So it gets dumped into the ocean and it's totally toxic to dogs. So it is natural, but it shouldn't be here naturally, if that makes sense. So that's the roundup of the quiz. I hope you all got 100%, but some of them were quite tricky. Even I didn't know the answer to number 11, but I hope you enjoyed the quiz there.
Oh, it was great. Actually, people did reasonably well. They spotted the obviously not natural ones, and then, but most people were pretty astute about that. But there were certainly some tricky ones, and I think the plastic pieces that look just like fish eggs, it would have been almost impossible to tell from the photograph which they were. So does anybody have questions for Emily? You can either put them in the chat box or unmute yourself and speak. Entirely up to you. Anybody want to ask any questions? Have you got a picture of your whale?
Yes, I've actually got a video that I can put the link in, so you can
put the link
later. Let me see if I've got a picture that I can quickly show you now.
This is a whale that Emily's community made out of all of the nets and plastic horribleness in the sea.
That the WI also sorted for
oh, really?
us. We owe them a lot. The whale, where is it?
Okay, Helen has a question.
Okay.
Not so much a question, but a sort of overall query. I think I heard someone talking about your guardians on television in the last week or two and realized you're only dealing with a 10-mile stretch. Is that correct, Emily?
I mean, it could have been. I was on TV this morning, and last week, so it could have been in us, yeah. But yeah, we do only take care of a 10-mile stretch of coastline in North.
So who is taking care of the rest of the coastline? I mean, it's a vast problem.
Indeed, and we're quite fortunate. I mean, I know obviously Southwest is my patch, so I know the most about the Southwest. There are fortunately community groups just like ours that take care of pretty much the whole coastline of the Southwest. We're all connected with each other, we all work together. It's a real community of conservationists that collaborate on all kinds of projects. And I'm sure it's very similar to the rest of the UK, the rest of the world. I mean, there's a fantastic campaign that runs every single year called World Cleanup Day. It's one weekend in September, and millions, if not billions of people across the world take part. I think there was definitely groups from every continent except obviously Antarctica, taking part. So that the coastline around the world and, inland places around the world, there are people working tirelessly to protect them. So don't worry, that it's covered-ish.
Can I just go on whilst I've got the floor and ask whether the COVID lockdowns throughout the world have had an impact on, as far as you know, what's gone on?
Anecdotally, I would say 100%. The research is incredibly novel and really in its infancy at the moment, obviously, because it's still happening. But anecdotally, I'm sure all of you saw, there was a barrel jellyfish in the canals in Venice and sheeps running around the towns in Wales, and all sorts of lovely stories of nature kind of coming back into industrial landscapes. And I think that just shows promise of a future that we can hope for, where, we were only on pause for a matter of weeks to months before we saw the positive impact on nature. So it shows that it is incredibly resilient. And if we just take a few steps, then we can, have that balance with nature. In terms of the impact that I've seen, the beaches were spotless, absolutely pristine. And I don't know if that's whether it was because of the absence of people, or just that it was spring and summertime, the seas were calmer, so less was coming in, probably a mixture of both. But we have seen the arrival of the latest kid on the block, PPE pollution. That obviously wouldn't have happened without COVID-19. But I do think that there's a positive to that too. It took us 50 years to wake up to plastic pollution. PPE pollution, everybody's talking about it already. We know that it has impacts on wildlife. We know that we need to stop it. And I think it's just a credit to society that we have that awareness already there. We're way past the saturation point now of being, a community of conservationists. So yeah,
Emily, there's a very good question on the chat here. I'm going to just summarize it. How do you actually get rid of all the plastic that you collect and know that it's not going to go back into the sea again?
It's such an important question, and there's, you know, because this is all so new, there's lots of new and innovative ways arriving, you know, every week or so. One particularly good way for us to dispose of the nets in particular is there's this scheme called the Ocean Recovery Project, and they take plastic fishing nets that we find, which is by weight the majority of what we find on our beach cleans, and they send them to Denmark. We're hoping for a facility in the UK soon. The nearest place is Denmark, and they're shredded, pelletized, and turned into marine kayaks, which are then used by community groups to go back out and find more nets. So we're really in that circular economy system with that. Another fantastic way that we dispose of some of the materials, I'll see if I've actually got an example. I do. There's a really lovely local business based in Falmouth that makes jewelry out of some of the non-recyclable items that we find, so sweet wrappers and that kind of thing, and they shred them up and set them in an eco resin to make some really beautiful glittery jewelry, if you can see that. So we're really just trying to find niche waste streams that are local and we can see exactly where the rubbish is going. But as you saw, we have a monster pile of plastic just waiting for the answer.
Anybody else? Let's change to gallery view so I can see if anybody's got their hand up. Anybody have another question they'd like to ask? Namwaka, you need to unmute yourself. Can't unmute her for some reason. Maybe she will, maybe she won't.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can. Namwaka from
Okay.
Zambia. Speak.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
You have a question? Do you have a question?
Thank you. Another permanent way of like getting rid of plastic is maybe making tiles, plastic tiles, like roofing tiles or roofing sheets out of plastic, because they'll be there up there for ages or maybe years without being a nuisance to the environment. At least they'll be there for a long time, and then maybe make even floor tiles, something like that.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody
Yes.
from a local council recently, and they've been making the edges of their pavements out of recycled plastic. There's an awful lot of things we can do.
It's interesting
Okay.
that you say
Yes.
it's interesting that you say roof tiles and floor tiles, because that's actually what the crisp packets get turned into from the Walker's recycling scheme.
Ah.
So obviously we don't have the infrastructure at the moment to turn a crisp packet into a crisp packet, which would be ideal. But once they're shredded all together, it's very low grade plastic. You know, it's not a very nice color or anything like that. So they turn it into roof tiles. And like you perfectly said, it's so durable that it will last a lifetime, if not longer.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
you.
so Leslie Winrow has just signed up for your newsletter, so I think she's probably encouraging everybody to do the same. And if you look at the chat, everybody, Emily has shared a link which will go to her whale, which is amazing. You must go and have a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Okay, so what have we taken out of this? We need to remind us again, what are your 3 R's?
Reuse, retrieve, and report. So reuse what you can, always first and foremost, especially if you can reuse it for the same purpose that it was designed for. Retrieve, pick up any rubbish, any litter that you can, of course, only when it's safe to do so, and keep washing your hands. But report, number one, just talk about the planet and spread the word.
So when you say report, you say talk about it, but do you also mean doing the sort of thing you did and complain to the manufacturers and that kind of stuff? Is that something?
Anything that you feel empowered and passionate about is what you should do.
Excellent. And try and encourage people not to use so many plastic bottles.
Yeah,
that's a bit of a campaign of mine. I went to King's Cross Station a little while ago, and I had a reusable bottle. And could I find anybody who would fill it for me? Not a single person. This was about 3 years ago, so hopefully now that's changed.
I'll tell you something that will make you even more passionate about that. Every single minute of every single day in the UK alone, 750 plastic bottles are littered. 750 every minute.
So if everybody on this call just stops using plastic bottles, we'll have achieved something.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Emily. Absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming all the way from Cornwall. I know you didn't, but you know.
The long drive.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll all look at the website and sign up for your newsletter and support what you're doing, but also just doing it locally, picking up plastic, looking after the environment. Thanks very, very much for coming, everybody. And I hope you'll join us for trees on the 9th of December.
Take care, everybody, and stay safe and have a lovely Christmas. It's Christmas soon.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
so much.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
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 Mm.